Microsoft Gaming is dead, Xbox has returned, and they've done so with a triumphant statement that reads, "We are Xbox." That's right, we! You're an Xbox, I'm an Xbox, but most importantly, the new CEO Asha Sharma and Chief Content Officer Matt Booty, well, they are Xbox. That's certainly what they want you to think. But you may be wondering, what the hell is an Xbox anymore? That's basically the thing they're trying to redefine. And in today's video, we're going to work out what's going on and dive into the amazingly well-executed PR that they're running on everyone. What we got is leadership drawing a line in the sand after years of chaos. We've even got a new logo that, funnily enough, pulls a little bit from Apple's design language. But all of this is done to show you that Xbox has changed. But have they really changed? That's what we're going to work out today. This quote's going to define Asha Sharma's time as Xbox CEO. And it is, the plan is the plan until it's not the plan. That's what she laid out in her first week in the job in an interview with Windows Central. She explained that she would take her time to learn, candidly, she said, about why her predecessors made their decisions before, well, going on to make decisions of her own. Now, it was a very buzzword-heavy interview, but hey, as a CEO, it does kind of go like that. But basically, she said she wouldn't rush to change everything. What's a bit strange is that now, a few weeks later, we kind of know the plan. And it starts with describing just how Xbox has failed. We have work to do. Players are frustrated. Those words were in a memo for staff, but obviously it's a very player-centric memo, and that's probably why it ended up immediately getting to the public. It also implicitly throws previous leadership under the bus. It goes on to talk about console features not turning up fast enough, that Xbox and PC isn't strong enough, and, most relevant to you, that pricing is getting harder for people to keep up with. Then, systemically, discovery, personalization, and social features aren't connected enough for players, and developers don't have enough tools and don't think that Xbox helps them enough. Yeah, a bunch of real problems that were all in this memo. Now, they also nailed the state of the industry in the memo too. The next generation of gamers are used to their Robloxes, their Netflixes, and their social medias. They want games to be everywhere, they want to access games instantly. Now, the console market is still significant, but we all do know that PC is growing faster. Subscriptions are growing faster than ever as well, and big budget games basically means bigger and bigger risk. We've seen that ravage the industry over the last 5 or 10 years. And a consequence of a lot of Western slowdown is that now half of gaming revenue comes from new markets like China and Brazil, and their developers are catching up with Western AAAs. Of course, you'll know all this stuff if you watch the channel, but in this memo it's all laid out rather plainly. So now, Xbox's mission for themselves is to be a challenger in this new market. That's a good enough sounding change, and it's clear that the model that got us here is not going to be the one that takes us forward. So, now that we've seen how Xbox is identifying the issues in the state of the industry, let's see what the hell they want to do about it. What's clear is that Sharma wants to project change. Emphasis on the word project there. Now, a statement to Windows Central showed one of her first acts. Asha retired "This is an Xbox" because it didn't feel like Xbox. Another quote reads, "She is personally leading a reset of how we show up as a brand." That stuff does sound pretty good. So I guess now that isn't an Xbox because we are all Xboxes, which is so buzzwordy that it basically doesn't make sense anymore. So what's actually changing? The series consoles aren't going anywhere. They need to be a, quote, healthy and high quality base. The future though is Helix. Basically, Helix will be able to play PC and console games on a console that also can, quote, lead on performance. The rest of their hardware plan is unchanged, with accessories and, quote, a strong ecosystem that expands choice and reach. Whatever that means. Which also does mean, so far, not so different. We kind of knew Helix was going to be a thing, and the leaked 2022 plans showed that the next console was targeting 2028, which does mean that all this stuff was set in stone well before Asha Sharma got here. So, translation, it's not her plan, though obviously she can change the delivery of the plan that had already been set up for her. And it's similar enough with games. They talk about more franchise development and better third-party relationships. Now, in fairness, this has been a strong point for Xbox. We've had games like Ninja Gaiden 4 or marketing for Expedition 33 do fairly well and be a tight enough collab. So really, there can't be much change here. They need a 5-year dev plan, all whilst maintaining their live games and long-term stewardship, which probably just covers everything from Activision Blizzard's live service games to Age of Empires' constant support, which, by the way, huzzah, is coming to Mac soon. That made me really happy. Though there was one odd note. They say they want to elevate creator-centric platforms. And of course, with the Roblox mentioned earlier, you'd think that this would all be about user-generated content. But the games talked about are The Elder Scrolls Online and Sea of Thieves, which don't have UGC in the same way that, say, Minecraft does. Maybe they mean social media creators? It's hard to say, but what they were clear on was selling more games to China and more games in emerging markets. So let's be real, it is goddamn obvious. Everyone's doing that now. Let's move to the next thing then, which is how players play. Basically, they want to fix all of the player and dev problems that were mentioned earlier, and this has already started under Sharma. A, quote, dedicated team to focus on fan feedback has been spun up. The first thing that team did was polish up achievements. But where people play also does matter, and despite the whole death of "this is an Xbox," an ad campaign that would like show a picture of your phone and say, "this is an Xbox," I guess because cloud streaming or something, look, there still is plenty of that. We literally see mobile-first audiences still being there as an area for expansion. Now, cloud gaming is supposed to get better for TVs, and Game Pass is still a key to that. They say Game Pass is going to be fortified with, quote, clear differentiation and sustainable economics. And by the way, sustainable economics is why they cut Call of Duty in order to drop the price. And then differentiation is probably the thing that explains the leaked tiers for every Discord Nitro subscriber. Which, hey, sure as hell, that is a way to increase your daily active users. Now this all comes down to business goals, and on that there is a bit of chatter. Our new North Star will be daily active players. So there's no mention of platforms or what games. Basically, it's just anything. It all counts. Which is probably why mergers and acquisitions aren't over. You know, if Xbox can't grow naturally, then they'll have to buy whatever it is that they feel they need. But that's likely going to be limited. But above all that, Xbox say they will, quote, regain durable growth with strong cost discipline. Yeah, talk to me like that, sexy language. Which does mean, of course, that cuts still are an option. Obviously, they're always going to be an option. But it does tell you something. Despite rumors from Windows Central sources that they are lowering the profit margin pressure, Microsoft obviously still does expect profits. And that does mean, so far, so similar. It's hard to know exactly what's changed other than some immediate quick things like this player experience task force that's been messing around with achievements and are going to do other UI things. Because yeah, if the Xbox 360 blades come back, apparently everybody will coom. Yes. But what might change is probably the big one, and it is their approach to, quote, exclusivity, windowing, and AI. That's it. They're going to change how they do Windows in their office. Amazing. Now look, this is kind of vague, but what it sounds like is exclusive games being an option again, and that is despite Forza Horizon 5 selling 5 million copies on the PS5. Now that sort of thing could still happen. Games maybe will just take longer to reach other platforms, maybe it'll be a timed exclusivity thing. It's hard to know at this stage. Now, the AI talk could go either way. So far, Sharma is presenting herself and is being presented as being anti-slop. I think we can all get behind anti-slop. But what is a little bit sloppy is the statement that just ends with real startup energy. It's a list of things that Xbox is, and they are corpo bullshit principles of the highest order. They're things for Xbox staff, not you, and if you know what signal over ceremony means, say in the comments. I mean, you have a fair idea. It's basically just focusing the shit that matters instead of the stuff that we do, because it's what we do, which can be a real problem in big orgs. So maybe that means that Asha wants to just come in there with a big mace and blast a bunch of shit to pieces that's just being done for the sake of it. Who knows? But you know what is a little striking? How little of this is actually new. Most of it is stuff Xbox already said they were doing. We got a new leader, we got a new logo, and while we don't have the same plan, I think we have mostly the same plan. But I actually think that could do fairly well. Because the biggest thing that they got wrong is how everything they did felt to players. Even though Phil Spencer, I think, generally did come across as a guy who really just loved video games. But a lot of what that org produced just didn't feel good to people. It seems to me that that's what Asha really wants to focus on. And given her experience in the likes of Instacart, I basically I did some research into her past, the sorts of things that she would focus on, and it basically seems she's a dialed-in person who's got to focus on the actual customer. That seems good. But all this brings up a question. Why does Xbox keep needing to do this? Why the resets, the rebrands, the repeated lines in the sand? Well, to answer that, you gotta look at the last 5 years of just chaos and shit. Before Sharma got the job, Xbox's strategy felt like it was constantly shifting, and they even admitted it in this statement. And we also know why. In 2022, Xbox absorbed Activision Blizzard, creating Microsoft Gaming. It doesn't seem likely Phil Spencer pushed for a closer brand integration, but a year later they actually reorganized again into having ZeniMax, Activision Blizzard, and Xbox's hardware division all being moved under Microsoft Gaming. It was all this weird, confusing stuff. But then, of course, came price hikes and Game Pass restructuring, plus the big shift in how exclusive their games would be. Now, all of this was happening whilst people were leaking to the likes of Windows Central that Microsoft were demanding higher and higher profit margins. And of course, with higher margins, we get lots of cost savings through the likes of layoffs and cancellations, all to fund the one thing that really matters: data centers. The whole "this is an Xbox" marketing campaign basically built presence off the Xbox platform, all to help drive revenue from non-console things, because the consoles were, not really doing so hot. And this all sounds like a breathless list of shit they tried. Well, yeah, I'm out of breath, and it was a big old list of things that they tried. Now, right after this statement dropped, the new one that is, Microsoft's financials came in, and they came in negative across Windows and Xbox. The two things where customers are not particularly pleased these days. Gaming revenue was down 7%, content and services were down 5%, and Xbox hardware was down 33%. Goddamn! It was a bad year on many fronts, but the biggest front was probably the Call of Duty front. And of course, they kind of had minimal new releases to really soak up the impact. But what this video is about is what's actually changed. And I would say the difference is how Microsoft has prepared for that news and how they're actually treating Xbox right now. So let's talk about that. Phil Spencer and Sarah Bond's decisions were not made in a vacuum. Microsoft was demanding high margins and doing layoffs to fund data centers. There's a bunch of leaks, and of course, their business policies are the reason for, say, some of the Xbox boycotts, or just people not feeling like they really gave a shit about the brand anymore. That was the background noise the last 5 years, and the reason Xbox's plans kept on shifting. You see, the thing you have to remember here is that AI was basically seen, potentially, and kind of still is seen, of course, as both a humongous opportunity, but also an existential threat. And certainly, I mean, look, you see a new Claude model release, and a bunch of software as a service companies have their stock go down. Yeah, there's reasons why, at a corporate level, they wanted to go full send into that shit and free up resources to do so. Obviously, that was not good for us, it was not good for anyone at Xbox, and it's one of the reasons behind the ever-shifting plans. Of course, there's also some direct AI influences, like forcing Copilot into Xbox, or putting generative AI into performance reviews, which is something that has been linked back to the Xbox unionization efforts. Strange little wrinkle. Now, Phil Spencer and Sarah Bond did not really lose their plans. They basically just had them rewritten and represented. That's what's been going on with the Asha Sharma stuff. So when Sharma stands up in, say, 2 months and tells us that the whole model and everything has changed, I guess the real question is how much of that plan is actually hers, and how much is this her being a delivery to customers style of CEO, more than whatever, say, Bond and Spencer ended up feeling themselves in when they were working in a Microsoft that obviously was not really doing a great job at the soft bit, was it? Just look at Windows. If I was Satya, I'd just shoot up a bunch of Tren and rebrand the whole shindig to Macro Hard. Screw Microsoft, that's a wimp's name. Anyway, let's talk about the plan being the plan, what's going on. Basically, I think Microsoft are maybe giving the new leadership a bit of a grace period to try and reset things, having some real agency that perhaps Spencer and Bond didn't have. But there's also probably a reason players are being primed with all of this information now. Just like Xbox said about Sharma's plans, this is a chance for a cultural reset of, quote, how we show up as a brand. And I think that's one of the things they have cocked up the most. And really, most of what's been laid out internally is tinkering around the edges. New teams to deliver in features, changes in focus to address player feedback. But the broad structure is unchanged. It's a big, multi-plat ecosystem that sells games and Game Pass subscriptions that is ran by people who ultimately answer to Microsoft. That is what it is. and I don't really think that's going to change much. So my message here today is, as much as it's really fun, and look, in our work chat, we all partake in the, Queen Sharma saving everything, memes that are going on. But I want to be clear, what we're getting now is mostly marketing. And I don't mean that in a devious way, because marketing is a really important part of the product experience. You see the marketing, and that primes you to experience the product. And if the marketing, the messaging, all of those things, if that's done right, then whenever you receive the product, maybe you're going to be a bit more primed to actually like it. Imagine if, say, you got a new phone or a new something, and it just came in a Ziploc bag. And I think that's why the whole "this is an Xbox" campaign basically failed as hard as it did, because while it was in line with her corporate strategy of growing the brand outside the console, what it did mean is that people who once gave a shit about Xbox, or maybe still have an Xbox, would basically see a picture of something that isn't an Xbox and marketing copy that said, "this is an Xbox." Of course, they know it isn't really an Xbox, so obviously that did not work. That's a good example of well-meaning marketing that makes strategic sense, but that fails at the level where it gets delivered to a customer. And from what I can tell, getting that kind of thing right is more what Sharma's focus and strength has been. So there's nothing inherently wrong with what's going on here, except perhaps for one thing. Microsoft Gaming might be dead, but the Microsoft that killed it is very much alive. And that's the same Microsoft that demanded the margins, funded the data centers, pushed Copilot into consoles, into Paint, into fucking Notepad, and yes, put the Gen AI stuff in the performance reviews. Sharma is not the first Xbox boss to draw a line in the sand. We all saw Spencer do that after Matrix, but she is the first one operating after years of that line being moved by people above her pay grade. So, just as she said, this is the plan. But the question is going to be, where will that plan be in 6 months? Will it still be the plan? What will it be in a year? If Phil Spencer and Sarah Bond had made statements like this, how fast would they have been forced to change them? And I say that because of one of my intrusive thoughts. I would look at Phil Spencer and I would just think, lies of P. Phil Spencer. The game Lies of P. That would just appear in my head. And it's not because I really thought Phil Spencer was ever lying to us whenever he would say something that would later turn out to not be true. I think he was in a shitty position where stuff kept on changing all around him, where plans were being made and executed but then changed and all of that hell bullshit. And really the thrust of this video, the big thing, is that really seems to have came from Microsoft. The question is whether Microsoft have changed. Sharma is there as a new person in the job. It seems that her skill set is really, really well matched to the problems the Xbox brand currently faces. But she reports to Satya. Satya doesn't report to her. She reports to the big CFO, not the other way around. And those will be the fundamental constraints of the Xbox brand. When I look at Sony, I see a company that really has to make PlayStation work because it's such a huge part of, their entire business. It needs to work. Plan A must work, or else Sony's basically screwed. When I look at Microsoft and Xbox, well, you know what? Xbox is but one of many different things. And maybe if some of their AI ambitions do end up taking off over the next few years, well, then Xbox might be a less and less and less important part of that business. Meanwhile, with Sony, they goddamn need PlayStation. I don't recommend pre-ordering a console, but if you put a gun to my head and said you must pre-order the next console from one of these two big companies, I would choose PlayStation, and the reason why is honestly fairly simple. It's because PlayStation means more to Sony than I think Xbox means to Microsoft. It's basically as simple as that. Now, what's not simple is American legal stuff, but I have got American legal stuff that is relevant to you whether you're in the America or not in the America. Well, the United States of. It's basically about stop killing games in California. It's pretty big shit, because if laws change in California, the fourth biggest economy in the world, you can be damn sure there'll be ripple effects. So if you want to learn all about that, check out this video next.